Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Learning Blender. Today we're going to be adding a wood texture to our table. So the first step is going to be going into the shading tab on the top. So press shading and then you will see this right here. So we're just going to press the table and you see here this is our material. So right now we just have a principal BSDF and then connected to a material output. So here we can just change the color, make it more metallic, roughness, and you can even make it transmission so it looks like glass. However, we're not going to get into that. Right now we're just going to be making a wood texture. So what we're going to do is we're going to tap on this blank space right here and we're going to do Shift A like we're adding in a brand new object. But instead we're going to be adding a node. So just search for noise. So then you select the noise node and you just put it down here. Next, what we're going to be doing is add a color ramp. So just add it right here. Connect the factor from the noise texture to the factor of the color ramp, and then connect the color from the color ramp over to the principal and the base color. Now, as you see, we have this right here. So what we're going to do next is add a mapping node so that all the textures fit on perfectly. So what we're going to do is again Shift A, search mapping. Add the mapping right here, connect the vector from the mapping to the vector on the noise texture, and then one last thing, we're going to do a texture coordinate, and then just take the object and connect it to the vector. And then next we're going to do is we're going to take the noise texture and we're going to up the distortion a little bit and probably bring up that detail. And we're going to go to our color ramp and we're going to select this black node right here. We're going to make it a little white and kind of give it a brownness to it. And then you can move it over here a little, take the white, add some brown to it. And there we go. We have a really simple kind of wood texture. And then if you want to add it to the legs, what we're going to do is we're going to press this button to view materials, and we're just going to select the material we made. Oops, and if you accidentally pressed on brand new material, don't worry, just go over and swap over to the first material you made. And there we go. We have a very good looking table. And if you don't like how this looks, you can change the distortion, make it more distorted, less distorted, change the scale, the detail. Just play around with it until you get something you like and looks pretty good. You can change the colors. You can move these right to left to change which one is the dominant color, which one is going to pop more. And there we go. We have a very decent looking table. Again, you can play around with this. The reason why I wanted to show you how to make this instead of just importing a image texture is because this is very useful to learn to use the noise textures and color ramps. If you want, you can go ahead and play around with this. I definitely suggest you do that to figure out exactly how these work. I'm just going to go over a quick overview of them. This texture coordinate is basically telling Blender where the object is and the size of it. And basically it's going to map the texture over it evenly. And then you also have a mapping node to connect to the vector, and then the vector to connect to your texture. So that's going to be telling it where it wants all this to be. And as you see here, it's a little scrunched up here. You might be able to change that to the generated vector and see if that does anything. There we go. So by swapping over from the object vector to the generated vector, it actually fixed that. So now it's evenly spaced all over. So it sometimes depends for me. Sometimes the object is what helps. Sometimes the generated is what does it for me. Just try to see if you have to take the generated to the vector or if you have to take the object to the vector. And just look at the size. If they look scrunched up, then instead of having the object, swap over to the generated. And that's about it. That's a simple overview of the texture and mapping. So then we're going to go over to the noise. And basically it's what it sounds like. It adds noise to it. So if you see, we can scale it up and we'll have all this noise. The distortion kind of adds twist to it. And it's pretty basic. Detail is different level of detail. Nothing too difficult. And then the color ramp is very useful not only for colors, but also if you want to, so let's say, add a bump, which you'll learn later. It basically makes the surface look bumpy. If you wanted to add that, then you can use the color ramp to determine how much bump you want to have appear on your object. However, for this case, we're just using a color ramp for the colors. So we have these two right here, these two little nodes that you can move. You can add another node if you want. If you want to add some more detail, maybe an additional darker color. Depends about what you want. It's a little too dark. There we go. And then we can bring that up. Just play around with it a little. And then basically, next up we have the Principled BSDF, and this is just the all-in-one kind of color format. So basically you have the base color for basic color that you want your mesh to have. You have how metallic you want it to be. We're actually going to bring up the metallic a little bit to make this look like a smooth surface. And then you have the roughness. We're going to bring the roughness down so it's really smooth. And then you also have index of refraction. Basically, that's useful for transmission, which we will reach in the next episode. And then you also have emission, which we'll talk about later on. You have the alpha, which we'll maybe discuss later on. Basically, the alpha is how much your object's going to show up, how see-through it is. And then you have the material output, which is basically the output for the material, what you see here. So without the material output, you would see nothing. That's why you have to connect the BSDF to the surface, and you have your material output. If you connect it to the volume, it kind of disappears. So make sure you connect it to the surface. And that's about it. You have a basic texture. Now, as you see here, we went back to layout mode, which is what we use to edit our object, and the colors just disappeared. That's because we're in the viewport shading. What we want to do is go over to this different viewport shading here, and this actually lets us see the colors and kind of the reflection before we actually start rendering, which we will get on to later. And that is about it. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned a lot from this, and I'll see you in the next episode.